Ladies and gentlemen, behold this big, blue, beautiful bruiser. It's the DNA Stratus Donald North Audio Strat. Look, it says it right there. It's a single-ended triode design tube amplifier, so set. You might have seen that term around, SET. So you've got these two A3 triode power tubes. You've got a 5U4G rectifier, and then you've got a sort of unfamiliar to me 6-in-1P input tube. Back here, the massive 10,000-pound transformer, a couple of hum pots, and then your front panel here, which is a nice solid chunk of brushed aluminum. So this is a totally boutique, hand-built, point-to-point wired pride and joy of the builder, Donald North, and he's got 3 amps in his line. This is the mid-tier one. I can't remember the names of the other ones. They all start with S. But this is a V3 variant of this amp, so third generation, and he is going into a V4, I think, right now, which will, I believe its transformer upgrades make up the major difference, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Anyway, it's going to come with a price tag increase that'll put it at the $4,500 mark. I think this one was retailing more in the like 3,500 or 3,100. I don't know. You have to check with him, but somewhere in that realm. So this is not a inexpensive device, but it is gorgeous to behold in real life. I'd seen photos before this one came into my life, and it does look as good, if not better, in person. Everything is just so spot on. You know, the little sort of nuts here tightening around the switches, they're all like lined up and pointed. Like everything is super crisp. All the parts are very, very high end. This volume knob is like one of my favorite things in the world. It's got some nice little grippy knurling here, and it's numbered on this little chamfered surface, and it's so smooth. Very happy there. Anyway, just a quick kind of walkthrough before I get into impressions. So you got 3 options for your. So this is headphone only, right? This doesn't have any speaker taps. This is just a pure headphone amp. You've got 3 output options. You've got your TRS, your tip ring sleeve, if anyone's keeping track, your 1/4 inch. You've got 2 stereo 3-pin XLR outputs, not super in vogue anymore for headphones. Then you've got your 4-pin XLR out, which he's labeled K1000 after the legendary headphone, but obviously you can plug any 4-pin XLR you like in there. You got a couple of switches. These are kind of interesting. So you've got a if you're running out of the 1/4 inch, you can run it on the, what is it? I think it's 8 ohm if you're in standard gain, 8 ohm impedance, or you can run it in the IEC, that's the International Electronical Commission standard from 1996, which believed that headphone impedance should be 120 ohms. So you can have that, or you can have 8. Up to you. And it's actually kind of fun. It's interesting. It's not necessarily super direct in terms of headphone matching. Like you can go with the manufacturer's spec on impedance and be like, oh, it's more like 8 or it's more like 100. But it's kind of fun to play with it in different tracks and different scenarios. It actually, I'm sure I'm probably, not doing the right things, but I just used it to get a kind of tone that I liked. The higher impedance stuff gets a little leaner and sort of more accurate, maybe more detailed, and the lower in most cases tend to get a little bit richer and fuller. But not always. It's kind of wacky. Impedance still makes my brain hurt to try to think about. On the other side, you got I guess the switch serves 2 purposes. Again, if you're in the 1/4 inch, the TRS, you can have no attenuation, so just full gain, or you can have -6 dB. And then, you know, if you're using a lower sensitivity, or, yeah, higher sensitivity headphone, where you might want to have more adjustability in the volume, you can knock it down. So it's like low gain. And then if you're using the XLR, you can have the XLR run as single-ended or balanced, which is kind of interesting. So your inputs on the back, I'm not going to swing it around because it's a heavy beast and you don't want to hear me groan. You got 2 sets of RCAs in the back, and there's a switch on the back to go between them. But it's a single-ended amplifier, and so you go, well, then you can't run balance out of it. But you can run balance out of it, because this is this whole thing where the word balanced means like 6 different things in this. You know, there's balanced interconnects. There's like a balanced like 2 mono chassis. You know, there's balanced output, which is again different. So it was kind of fun to go back and forth. I actually didn't find a huge difference between running it with 4-pin XLR out in balanced versus single-ended. And I actually, on this amp, I think I generally preferred running the 1/4 inch over the 4-pin XLR, which is strange because most amps that offer this, I guess maybe many of them are balanced amps, so that will tend to be the best output. But in this case, I actually thought that the 1/4 inch sort of had a bit more richness, and maybe the 4-pin XLR had a bit more top end clarity. You get the same power out of all of them, which is kind of interesting. So you get, I think it's 1.8 watts at 50 ohms, or 900 milliwatts at you know, twice that, 1000 ohms. I think those conservative, I mean, those are very conservative ratings. I think this amp has been set up to be, it's a headphone amp, so you don't need to push that power. That's plenty of power to run most headphones. But I think a 2A3, you know, would be rated at more like 3 or 3.5 watts. So very conservative. Listening to this and listening to other amps that I have that are sort of rated in the similar power range of, like, you know, 1.5 watts, you know, 1.75 watts, this feels more powerful to me. It feels like it's pushing more power. So I don't know if the builder's just being conservative in his ratings, or if it's just the difference in sort of how one power tube or another power tube sort of expresses its power. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, let's talk about how it sounds. So if you, like me, love 2A3s, which I do, you know, it's just one of the sweetest sounding triode power tubes out there. I got interested in these. I have a Stereo More by Bottlehead. That's a cool kit amp, and I built an attenuator box, and I was running like the Abyss 1266 and some other hard to power headphones, HE 1000, out of that amp. And well, I mean, I originally fell in love with 2A3s listening to speaker amps, because they just have this sort of just when properly executed, I think they have this like fluidity and this romance and this lushness, but without like lacking detail. Like, it's just this sort of honest, natural tone that, you know, I think is sort of what you expect from tube amps, but maybe not what you always get from tube amps. Anyway, so I really got interested in these in the realm of speakers, and then I tried with this attenuator box to power headphones, and I thought, oh, this is cool. They sound rock and roll. They sound, you know, rich, and I'm excited. But also, like, you know, the Stereo More is not designed to be a headphone amp, so it's just trying to create as much power as it can out of these tubes to power, you know, high efficiency speakers, but still only at like 3 watts. So the noise floor is pretty high, and it's not the most sort of delicate, detail-oriented thing. So I was really excited to try this because I wanted to hear that 2A3 executed with headphones in mind. And so I was testing with the HE 650s. I'll put a headphone on camera because it's just so boring to just not look at things moving. Ooh, moving things. So the HE650s are very nice because they're very telling about what the source is, and they're very honest and revealing about source. I listened to some Sosfaras from Headphone, also the HE6SE, so two very demanding planar headphones, and then two pretty undemanding headphones, the LSA HP1, which is a Kinnerton made headphone, and also the HP2. The HP1 is a dynamic open back, and the HP2 is a closed back, or sorry, HP1 is a planar open back, and the HP2 is a dynamic open back. Both great headphones. Reviews elsewhere on the channel. Check that stuff out. So anyway, pretty broad selection of headphones to really sort of put this thing to the test and see, kind of what it's made of. And what I got really across all these different headphones was a sense of weight, a sense of fullness to the sound, even in passages of music or certain songs that have sort of a drier mix or like a wispy sort of light, a thin roll part, like there's still weight to all those notes in that space, and I find that very compelling. There's just like a fullness. So like when you think about like things like classic rock, you think about like Steely Dan and Dire Straits and people with kind of drier mixes that are trying to kind of show off how good their audio quality is. Like, that stuff just feels great. It feels so, enjoyable, and you sink into it, and it never feels thin or tinny or like lacking. Just feels so great. What comes with that is maybe like a little bit less space, right? So, there's not maybe quite the level of separation or things being pulled apart. The notes are kind of, they're closer together, they're melding, they're making a thing, they're making music. They're making an output that's very musical, but maybe not as analytical, like maybe not really to sort of break down or cross-analyze or take it apart. It's very controlled, more controlled than like sort of EL83 or 6 and a 7 powered amps that I've heard. The slam and the impact are there, but they're there in kind of a natural way. They don't, maybe the leading edge of notes isn't quite as crisp as some other things I've heard. The bass is great. It's detailed, it's controlled, it's warm. There's definitely some amps that dig a little deeper and have a little bigger bass, but I think it's very, very pleasing. When you listen to it, especially on something like, say, let's bring something back on camera. This is so boring. Like the HD 650s. I listen to these both with a 4-pin balance cable and quarter-inch cable, or like the Sosfara. There's things that these real detail monsters. When you first sort of tune into this amp, you don't necessarily hear an intense sense of clarity right out of the bat, but it's totally there. You can go find it. It's just not being shoved in your face. It's not trying to prove to you that it can produce a lot of detail, but all the detail is there if you want it. But what I like about it is it's a much more sort of believable, cohesive sort of sound. Not like mushy, not like stuff's all merging together and it's too dreamy. It's very natural and human, and I think that works really well with things like vocals, strings, etc. So I guess to sort of sum it up, and I'm going to do a little. I should have said this right off the bat. Of course, I'm bad at these things. I'm going to talk a little bit about tube rolling. I haven't gotten to try a million things, but I have tried a few input things, a few power things, a few rectifier things, and learned a few lessons about how much you can sort of push this amp to be different, to be what you want it to be, and to best match your DAC, your upstream gear, and your downstream gear, your headphones. But I guess to sort of sum it up, I'd say it's got a fluidity that I think is just really intoxicating. It's got sort of a classic audio gear sound, like if you like older integrated tube amps like Icos or Fishers, or if you like that sound, then this is really going to appeal to you. If you listen to like a lot of say, female vocals, strings, whether that's like orchestral or smaller group stuff, and jazz, types of music where you want to have a more natural sort of analog sound, a more emotional connection to the music. You'd just be so happy with this. You'd just be so happy sinking into this. Like I said, it's not like the biggest sound stage. There's not a huge amount of separation. It's not like expansive to where there's things twinkling 20 feet outside your head. But that's sort of like a product of our friend the 2A3 here. That's sort of why you're getting into this amp and why you choose this over other things. That being said, there are ways between input rectifier and power tubes to push it a bit and get a bit more of that, if that's what you're after. So we'll cut there. I'm going to flip over and talk a little bit about tube rolling nowish. So I think these PS vanes that come with the amp are really nice because they have that balance of that warmth and fluidity, and detail. The detail's still very good, but I think what I ended up liking more, I tried the JJs. I had some of these around. These are the 2A340. They're supposed to be like a more powerful 2A3. So kind of nice for speaker use. These things get really, the slam comes through a lot more. They're really energetic and punchy, but I think they lack a little finesse, and maybe you're missing a little bit of what's so great about this amp and about 2A3 in particular. These Sophia 2A3 ends, these mesh plates, this is a bit older production, so it's got the balloon. I think the modern ones have more of the, that common stepped, I don't know what you call that. Is that the Coke bottle? I can't keep all my tube terms straight, but these were nice because they're a bit leaner, they're a bit drier, but they've got more separation and space. So for my personal taste, this was the right balance of like getting some hi-fi-ness, some cool sparkliness, while still getting that smoothness. Now the other way to go about that is, of course, with the regulator, or not go about that, but to kind of get it some of that fullness versus sparkly. Not that they're always in opposition. Amp comes with the Winged C, which is Russian-made rectifier. These are great. I've run these in my Tory, and very nice and reasonably priced tube. And I tried a few things. I had a JJ, which is like super affordable. I think they're like $20 or something, modern production. That's great. Like that's for me, that's like, it's tighter. It's more like, it's more, a little more punch. I tried, what was it? Oh, I don't know. There's so many tubes floating around here. Oh yeah, the Electro Harmonix. I didn't really go for this one. It's not my favorite. Now, spendy, but the Emission Labs 5U4GB, I think it is. This thing is one of the most controlled rectifiers. So if you want something that's tighter, drier, leaner, more spaced out, then this is, like I said, not cheap, but built like a tank. Supposedly they last forever. And speaking of last forever, I was running a 274 Sophia 274, which is a lower powered, 274B mesh rectifier tube from Sophia, and it sounds really great. I've run it on the Taboo for a long time, which is much lower power amp. I don't blame this amp, but it did arc and die while plugged into this amp, and I think it was just asking a little too much of it for the amount of power in this guy. So even though technically you can run it with 274s, they're not maybe as robust as you want long term. The input's interesting. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with the 6-in-1 Ps here. I guess maybe it's a Soviet standard, and there may not be a 100% equivalent in the US, except the 6BQ7A, which is, I guess a sort of similar one. The other tube that you can run is a 6N6P, which is also, I think, a 6H6P or ECC 99. So I got a handful of things there. What did I get? Yeah, so just a couple new old stock ones. I got a Sylvania and a Raytheon and an RCA of the 6BQ7A. And the Sylvania, across the board with this tube, instead of the 6N1P, I felt these were a little sharper, a little punchier. So for like the LSHP ones that are sort of a little warmer, softer headphone, these kind of brought a bit more detail back in for something like the Sasfara that's already ridiculously detailed. The 6N1P was probably the better fit, but if you want a little more punch, a little brighter, these are worth looking at. This guy probably kind of the nicest top end clarity, a little more space. The bass was really nice. I feel like the Raytheon also a little brighter than the 6N1P, but maybe a little softer, and the sound stage was probably a smidge more open. And then the RCA had like more drive. It felt more powerful, but it just didn't really kind of move me. And then what else here? Okay, here I think is let's pull this guy out for comparison. Whoop. Here is one of the 6H6Ns or the 6N6Ps, another Soviet tube, I believe. And these are nice. These have a little less drive than either the 6N1Ps or the 6BQA7As. Whatever, I threw some extra letters in there. Figure it out. This is a Russian gold grid, I think. That's all you get. A bit drier, less bloom, so like a little less euphoric maybe in the mids. So again, if you like cleaner, more space between things, and it had a real smoothness. But you do lose drive. So if you were trying to kind of take this amp to its limit for something like this, as far as that's probably not going to be the way to go, because you're just not going to quite get there taking that off the top end. Now on the LSHP1, which is a nice giant planar, it's decently efficient, and so that I was like volume 4 or 5, happily powering that. So the amp has a ton of power. It's just if you're getting into these, crazy Abyss 1266 and Sasfara, these really monsterly power hungry things. Like I said, the HE6 is just so hungry for power. It'll do it, and it'll make them sound fantastic, but it is kind of up at that upper limit. So if you're somebody who really cranks stuff up and likes to just listen to it super loud, that's a consideration for you. Yeah, I think that's it. If there's anyone still here listening, God bless you. Don't forget to subscribe for more things. I got another giant tube amp review coming up, as well as Sasfara and HE6 and some other things I've been had on the head lately. So yeah, tune in for that. In the meantime, summation on this guy, just a absolutely phenomenal headphone tube amp. And if you like that 2A3 sound, if that's something you've heard in the speaker world, if you've got a headphone that's pretty demanding and you really want to feed it a lot of juice, and you want something that feels natural and smooth, and like I said, strings, vocals, if you just want the equipment to sort of disappear and the sound to become just really pure and natural, I definitely check this amp out. It is just epic. All right, that's it. Sidecraft signing out.